Greetings again, this is Dr. Jimmy, and today being a new day, a new month, we can start a new series of videos on the history of Halloween Horror Nights 22. Once you're inside, there is no way out. Yes, that was the clever catchphrase for that event. But of course, as is traditional now, t-shirt of the day, Triguna McCordy's Antracorum Satus D. That is, of course, substitutionary locomotion, for those of you who ever saw the movie Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, done in a rather clever keep calm and carry on style, which is quite amusing when one considers it fits in with the whole theme of the movie. Not that that means anything. Before I go on to Halloween Horror Nights 22 though, there are a couple of things I forgot to mention. Merchandise for Halloween Horror Nights 21. The cat just walked by behind me. Where's that sneaky cat going? Oh, there she is. Mysterious. But we have here, for example, a set of playing cards. Regular playing cards for Halloween Horror Nights 21. That were part of it. And also a baseball cap. Very clever baseball cap for the event as well. On the back it says Scarecrew. Scarecrew. And oh look, I still have the tag. Why? Because I don't wear ball caps. They don't look good on my head. That's why I wear this instead, you see. So I've never worn that hat. $19.95 it said on the back of the tag. Oh, that's how much they sold it for. Rip off. Oh well. There are also several t-shirts, of course, and regular shot glasses and other paraphernalia. A t-shirt featuring Lady Luck and her spinning wheel, the Wheel of Fortune. The house shirt, of course, which had I think you saw it in a video recently, the one that reads, what was it calling? It said on it, House Always Wins. That was the house shirt, yes. And there was also Bill and Ted shirt, which was the 20th anniversary shirt, yes. Because it was the 20th anniversary of Bill and Ted in 2011. So, that's the merchandise, no need to go into any further. Let's proceed with Halloween Horror Nights 22, shall we? Yes, an event that was held at Universal Studios, Florida, on the evenings of September 21st, 22nd, 27th, 28th, 29th and 30th, and October 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, and the 31st. A total of 25 nights. Not a record number of nights that year, but it was the earliest start date in Orlando at that point, the 21st of September. Starting then on the very day of the autumnal equinox. Wow, very early at that point. Well, there's an old Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. Ooh, curse. Because, of course, if everything is boring and dull, it means you're safe. And nothing bad may happen. But interesting means, oh, anarchy, war, famine, pestilence, God knows what. Wasn't quite that bad, but 2012 was an interesting year for Halloween Horror Nights. It was a year of all sorts of setbacks and changes of plans, more so than any recent year that I can think of. A lot of people look back on Halloween Horror Nights 22 with some disgust and dismay. They think it was a bad year for the event, a year when things turned negatively. I'm not quite certain if I disliked it as much as many people, but for a lot of us it's the least favourite year of Horror Nights for various reasons, although there was a lot of fun to be had nevertheless. Oh dear. Well, one of the first big setbacks, of course, as you might be aware, you should be aware, this is a year-round thing for the people who create Horror Nights. There's lovely people in creative and art and design. It's not something they just do a couple of months before the event begins. It's something that happens all year round for them, because the moment one event starts, they immediately start planning the next one. So on the day that Horror Nights started in 2011, they started right away to start meetings and working on the event of Halloween Horror Nights 22. And we don't know exactly what the original plans were, that's never been revealed. either through leaks or anything else. I've heard some silly rumours. Some people thought maybe it's going to be at Islands and maybe there'll be an icon. Perhaps there was going to be an icon. It's definite, though, that they would have been planning something along the lines of the philosophy they came up with for the event in 2010. The New Age of Darkness. After all, the idea was that in Hollywood, it's IP driven with lots of movies and things that fits the Hollywood part. But in Orlando, original houses, original characters and original icons creating the new mythology, new characters, new ideas. That was the whole idea behind what they did in 2010 and pretty much carried on 2011, although they did have one intellectual property house, of course. And they were thinking they'd be doing 8 houses, maybe 1 IP, but mostly original and perhaps an icon. That was kind of what they were planning for the wonderful event. But something happened in the year 2011 that changed everything. Not just about Horror Nights, but about Universal, the whole corporation, not just theme parks, but movies and television, NBC, music, everything else they do for entertainment and information. It changed rather dramatically because the whole thing was bought, kit and caboodle, for, I think, billions of dollars by Comcast. And of course you have a new corporate entity running everything, a new parent company, and you have new corporate executives, and they want to get the best return on their investment, don't they? That's just logical and business sensibility. And so they wanted to, of course, they immediately started looking at how they could improve, and their view, screw up for other people's views, things to make it better and bring in more cash. After all, they have to make the thing pay for all the money they spent on it. So, one of the things they looked at was Horror Nights at Universal. There was a time prior to this, many years prior, when Horror Nights was a cash cow. They didn't fuck with it. They gave them a nice budget and let them do what they want, because this was what put Universal in Florida in the black every year. That changed over the years, and especially after Harry Potter opened, because Harry Potter's Wizarding World brought in more money than anything else. That became the cash cow. Oh, let's do something with Harry Potter, of course. That's what the part of it, absolutely. And Horror Nights wasn't looked on quite so much as untouchable. They had to do something because they thought perhaps sales had slipped. They looked at old events in the past. They looked at, I'm guessing, 2008. Well, there was an original icon, Bloody Mary. There were original houses, and the event didn't sell as well as they wanted it to. But in 2009, they had an icon, of course, that was the usher, but he wasn't used to promote the event. He was not seen in any commercials. He was not seen on the billboards. What they used to promote the event were the intellectual properties, the movies, Chucky and Wolfman and Saw, heavily promoted. That brought in more crowds. That works better. That was the way they were thinking. Now, they should have thought about the fact 2008 saw a great economic recession, and that the recovery started in 2009, and that factor might have something to do with the results, but they didn't think about that, apparently. They blamed it on original ideas and original icons that were not familiar to the crowds. Why, the common herd of people, not the crazy fanatical fans, but the majority of people come to the event, they're looking for brand recognition, after all. And what better brand recognition than a bunch of very highly recognized intellectual properties? In Hollywood, that's what they've been doing. They've been quite successful. Let's do it the Hollywood way now in Orlando. And so the word came down, it has to be done that way. Marketing and publicity were given much more power. There had been a bit of a power struggle between them and creative and art and design. Marketing won. Their arguments were there. No icon, no overall theme. The majority of the houses to be based on movies, television, that sort of thing. Maybe 1 or 2 original houses, okay, but the rest would be all intellectual property. That would be the focus of the event. That would be used to sell the event to get the crowds in. And so with that, they had to redesign quite a lot of their plans. And so all of a sudden, a whole bunch of original houses they'd come up with got scrapped, leaving only oh, I think it was 2 or 3 left that were original houses, and leaving them with the rest all IPs. And they were working on this prospect, and quite a few of the IPs were similar to ones in Hollywood, so that some of the shared IPs that were going to happen the same year in both parks. See, that's so Hollywood and marketing had more power over Orlando for a bit there. So that was a major setback for them, and they had to start redesigning the event for that purpose. There was another thing that happened in 2012, which also was a profound impact on the event. January 2nd, 2012 was the last night for the Jaws ride attraction, the last time the ride ran. As I mentioned before, Harry Potter became the big money maker for Universal. Expand Harry Potter, that was the plan. They'd actually planned that before Comcast bought it. A lot of people thought maybe the expanded Harry Potter would go into the rest of the Lost Continent. In Islands of Adventure, that only made sense, that old Sinbad show and some of the other stuff there. Change that up to another part of the Wizarding World. That seemed make the whole island into all Harry Potter. That would be sensible, but they had bigger plans, you see. Why not build the whole new Wizarding World in the Universal Studios Florida, Diagon Alley, and you could have a really fantastic attraction there, and you could even connect the two parks with a monorail. You could call it the Hogwarts Express. What a clever idea. They came up with that, and sure enough, in order to do that, of course, something had to give, something had to go bye-bye. And it was decided that the Jaws attraction, even though it had been there since the park opened, and had been a venerable part of the park for decades, had seen its course and would now be decommissioned. So after January 2nd, the last ride into Amity, the last Shark in the Dark in the boathouse, because it was at night, of course, the last ride, they closed it permanently and immediately began demolishing the entire attraction, all of Amity Village, tearing it down and beginning construction on the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Diagon Alley, which is there today. Of course, that meant that a location, in fact, the original location for haunted houses, the very first haunted maze ever, the Dungeon of Terror, way back in Fright Nights in 1991, had been located in the Jaws queue. That Jaws queue now could no longer be used because it no longer existed. Bye-bye, Jaws queue. Now you've lost a location for a haunted house. So Art and Design Creative had to find a new location, or they'd have to go down to 7 houses. Where could they put their 8th house? And they began looking around to figure out where they could put another house. Well, there was a building right there at Universal Studios Florida that had been used for a haunted house once before, oh, many years before, all the way back in 2008. That was, I think, 8 years previously. Well, not 2000. Yes, not 2008, 2004. Yes, at Halloween Horror Nights 14, the big event that had covered 2 parks, remember? They had a haunted house there called Horror Nights Nightmares, a retrospective house featuring Jack and Eddie, of all people, along with the caretaker and the director. All the old icons, including Eddie, featured in that nifty little house. They'd never used it for a haunted house again. That building had originally been used for the Murder, She Wrote attraction in the early 90s, and later the Hercules and Xena show. And for that reason it was often referred to by guests as the Hercules Xena building. But once that show ended, and after they used it once for a haunted house, it had just sort of been sitting there for years and years and years, not being used for anything at all. And people wondered what they would do with that property. There was a rumor they might use it again for Horror Nights, because I think around 2010 or 2011 they started refurbishing along one side of the building, putting in stanchions, and like they're refurbishing the queue area. Why would they do that when there's nothing in the house? Are they going to have a haunted house there? People wondered, and it turned out they were correct. There was going to be a haunted house there. There was going to be a very nifty haunted house in that building, which is known as building number 44, or soundstage 44, even though it really wasn't a soundstage at all. That plus the 2 sound stages that were available, 20 and 22. 23 was not available that year because of wrestling, I think. But those other 2 sound stages, they could put 3 houses there, 2 and 20, 1 and 22. They could use the disaster queue again, and they could use the parade building, and they could use the 2 sprung tents. And with building 44, or soundstage 44, they had their 8 locations. Very good. That's what they thought. Except there was another thing that happened that caused another bit of a setback. Beginning in 2012, another parade was added to the mix at Universal Studios. They'd had Mardi Gras parades in the early part of the year, in February to April, and then of course the Macy's parade in December. And so they had built a warehouse to house all the parade floats, Building 79. And they could use that for haunted houses beginning in 2008. All they had to do was take those Christmas and Mardi Gras floats off to one side, cover them up, and then the whole front of the warehouse could be used for a haunted house. Some rather wonderful haunted houses, in fact, from Scary Tales to the Forsaken, very nice ones that were in there. But now there was a new parade that would happen not seasonally, but every damn day. A parade featuring TV programs like SpongeBob SquarePants and Dora the Explorer, and films like Despicable Me and Hop. A superstar parade, and it ran every single day. And the new parade vehicles, they couldn't be covered up or moved because they had to be in that warehouse ready to come out every single day through the main bay doors. All of a sudden, they couldn't use the parade building. Oh no, now we're down to 7 houses again. And so it seemed they couldn't find any place else to stick a house, and so they were resolved and committed to do that which they had sworn never to do. There was no way out. Once you're inside, there's no way out. They had to go down a house, and for the first time in many years, drop from 8 houses down to 7 houses. They just had no way of getting around it. Furthermore, the parade presented another obstacle for scare zones. Oh, they'd enjoyed using such marvelous scare zones with all sorts of crafty set pieces, like the stages for 7 and that whole structure for the warehouse for the 20 Years of Fear, and then of course Asylum in Wonderland and all action, all of those on Hollywood Boulevard, the Tower of the Witch, Parade of the Wicked, the Containment Archway and Tunnel that they had in the Plaza of the Stars, Production Central. In New York, of course, they had all sorts of different things set up, stage pieces for the various scare zones there as well. But they couldn't do any of that because any set pieces they had in the streets, that they couldn't set them up and have them there all throughout the entire event. That's what they used to do. Because they would just people would just sit there in the street during the day, and at night they'd have the scare zone. But they couldn't do that because the parade had to go through that route. They couldn't do any scare zones that had set pieces. They couldn't do scare zones, traditional set scare zones. They had to come up with something else in the streets. And so they said, well, the only thing we can do then, if we can't have any sets for the scare zones, is just have characters in the street by themselves. We'll just have hordes of characters. You know, the Chainsaw Drill Team can move around. We'll have different hordes of characters, some sort of monsters roaming around the streets. That's all we can do, different roaming hordes. So that's what they had to come up with. So at this point, 7 houses and roaming hordes is what they had to end up doing. So they went back to the drawing boards to try to make it work. Roaming hordes, 7 houses, mostly intellectual properties. Of course, we didn't know that was going on back in January of 2012, but what we did know was a weird rumor had popped up. The silliest story. Apparently someone had spotted a tweet made by Pin Gillette, the larger, heavier, taller gentleman who's with his shorter, diminutive and usually silent companion Teller, formed the magic troupe Penn and Teller. and he tweeted that he was flying to Orlando with Teller, and they were going to go meet up with people at Universal Studios for some sort of new project, and how exciting, without saying what the project was. And some people immediately picked up on that and said, what if they're going to do something for Horror Nights? Maybe a show, maybe even a haunted house. Now that didn't make any sense. A haunted house featuring Penn and Teller? How ridiculous! What a silly idea. Well, I'll have to continue that silly idea in part 2.